policy change to solve youth unemployment. As we know, in South Africa, as you know, in South Africa as a country, we face some of the highest unemployment rates in the world, particularly, challenging, facing young people aged 15 to 34. We know that 50% of young people aged 15 to 34 are not employed. Basically, this is, in simple terms, this is 1 in 2 young people. So if you walked on the streets and you saw 2 young people, chances are one of them is not employed. And we also understand that the issue can be quite daunting. Researchers have called it by many different names. Some call it a ticking time bomb. Some call it a wicked issue. It's complex, it's overwhelming, and the challenges are deeply connected with each other. And they're also, it's also connected to what they call the triple challenges in South Africa, unemployment being one of them, and then the one being poverty and also inequality. But as Youth Capital, we believe that youth unemployment can be solved in the country. There is something that we can do about it, particularly as young people. We are often spoken about as people who don't have solutions to the challenges that we face. But at Youth Capital, we believe that young people's experiences can actually inform the challenges that they face. And we think that we can do this by putting pressure on decision makers so that we can push for the right policies that will help us shift the system together. And also we think that young people cannot just be seen as the face of unemployment. They usually say that being Women's Month, that the face of unemployment in South Africa is a young black woman, given that the young black women are definitely hit by this crisis. But we believe that young people can be change agents, and also young people can help us. As at Youth Capital, we believe that young people can help us to shift power, amplify youth voices, as I've said, in terms of informing some of the solutions that are there, and also to build practical solutions that center young people and allow us to lead. So one of the ways that we are doing that is exactly through this campaign. This campaign is called Community is a Verb. Community is a verb in the sense that we do together, but we are a country where there's a lot of slogans and a lot of copy that's thrown around. This is not just a slogan to us. We believe that this is a call to action. And through these conversations, we are exploring ways and means to build and show up for one another in our communities as we face these challenges, but also to not just show up, but to show up for one another and also take collective action that can create change from the ground up, so that our lived experiences in our communities inform and they can be used as tools for advocacy. Community now becomes this very important tool for advocacy and to shift towards the change that we want to see. And also community, as we know, it offers us belonging. It also allows us to take the collective action that we need to rewrite our futures. So this Women's Month, we are going to be talking about issues that are not just related to women only, but that are more aligned to, some of the challenges that face women in particular in the country. We know that the challenges are many. If you ask different people what is the most pressing challenge in South Africa, people will mention many things because the challenges are many. So we are turning our eyes on this topic called Invincible Threats, and we will be exploring 3 key topics with amazing speakers. The first one is around the unspoken labor, and this is around care work. And then we'll also be looking at cultural shifts and also the everyday acts that don't make headlines. They will be coming up in this session. So, as I mentioned, that the topic that we will be talking about this evening is how do we make sure to make the invincible visible. Basically, there's a lot of care work that women do, and there's also research that has shown that there is opportunities for us to shift unemployment and also provide opportunities around care work. And before I say a lot, because you can see I'm already mumbling, before I say a lot, I'm going to hand over to Lilita, because I've charted up my 5 minutes, who is going to guide us through the conversation and also introduce our amazing speakers.
Thank you, Nabe. Hi, everybody. My name is Lilita, and I'm excited to be moderating this important conversation today. So before I say anything, let me tell you first a little about me. I'm a seasoned radio presenter based in Mthatha with over 4 years of experience at UCR FM. I've honored my skills in broadcasting and content creation. I also work for Radio Workshop under youth committees, where I'm passionate about exploring the storytelling approaches and many more. Radio Workshop is a storytelling organization that works with over 12 community stations across South Africa to train and upskill young people, young people on air, and it talks about the issues that affect the community and the world at large in their voices and for themselves in Radio Workshop. Also, Radio Workshop also has podcast channels where we share African stories across the continent. You can find this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts for all the MTN users. They can also listen free on Ayoba app for the podcast of Radio Workshop. This is a powerful series that's all about how we as young people shape our communities and how we stay when things get tough. It's easy to feel like we are on our own, but there is much power in doing community together. I'm happy to announce that Radio Workshop is joining hands with Youth Capital for an exciting campaign. As youth reporters, we moderate the community talks, but also run the meetups in our community, bringing people together, building power together through conversations, connection, and action. There are 4 actions that we have. We first have votes, where we vote for our topics that we talk about, and then we have talk, where we talk about those topics. And then we also have meetups, where we also meet up as a community for many more to talk about those topics that we uploaded. And then we have upload, where we upload those topics online. As Nape mentioned on the previous when he was presenting, that community is a verb. Youth Capital's Youth Capital's new campaign. That's all about unpacking what it means to build and belong to a community, especially in a country where youth unemployment is such a big challenge. It isn't just a conversation, it's a movement making community. It's not just something we talk about, but something we do. In our first session, we explore the question, what is community? We spoke about how community isn't just where you live or who you know, but shared values, connection, collective responsibilities that hold us together. We reflected on how communities can build or rebuild to support young people, fuel advocacy, and help shape a better future for all of us. So now we're going to be talking about invisible trends. When we talk about invisible trends, which is our theme of today, we are talking about everything that makes the community function but goes unseen, uncounted, and undervalued. From the young woman doing unpaid care at home, to the activities creating safe space for GBV survivors, to the community health workers holding an entire street well-being. These are trends that wave our society together. But here is the thing, invisible workers doesn't mean unimportant. In fact, invisible is part of the problem. What's invisible can be ignored, and what's ignored can be unrefunded, unprotected, and left out policies. So tonight we'll pull on 3 threads you voted for, which is the first topic is shifting in power, shifting in culture. And the question was, what does it take to end GBV beyond hashtags? And then the second one is budget and blind spots. how policy choices make women's work invisible. And then the third one, we have care worker, the unpaid engineer of our communities. We asked you to vote for those topics. You spoke and we listened. So today we have three powerful voices that are with us evening, revealing different trends that, when woven together, makes the fabric of our community visible. Each speaker has like probably 8 minutes and 5 slides. With that in mind, we are excited to dive into today's conversation, and we have powerful lineup of voices to guide us. So on our panel, we have Aliya from AIDC. As a facial policy researcher, Aliya will unpack how government budget and policies choices make women's work invisible. She will show us how what's on paper affects who gets recognized and who gets left behind. Secondly, the second voice that is powerful is Kwenzokuhle from Red, a dynamic youth facilitator and advocate. Kwenzokuhle works with survivors of gender-based violence while pushing for cultural shifts. She will share insight on how communities can support youth, survive, and create real changes beyond awareness campaign. And lastly, we're going to have Victoria from Harambee, a labor market researcher. Victoria uncovers how care and inclusion shape youth employment. She will explore what recognition and structural support for careers and young people look like in practice. So without me rambling too much, let's begin for today's chat and have our speakers. Our first trend tonight is woven through culture and power. Kwenzokuhle from proves on the trend gender-based violence, asking what takes it and beyond hashtags and awareness. This is the work of shifting the wave itself, not just surface and patterns. So let's get right to it. First up, we're going to have Kwenzokuhle for us. Over to you, Kwenzokuhle.
Hi, everyone. Okay, am I audible and everyone can see me, right? Cool, thank you. I just need to start my 8 minutes on my clock here. And then let me share my screen. Hi, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Kwenzokuhle Khoza. I am the Community Impact and Youth Engagement at GRIT, which is Gender Rights in Tech. And today we're going to be talking on what is it that we need to do beyond the hashtags so that we can stop or do something when it comes to gender-based violence. And in one of our organizations, one of the things that we saw, we said, let's address gender-based violence through tech-driven innovations. And some of the key things that I'll be talking about, it is beyond awareness, power and culture, emotional safety and healing, and community-led change. So awareness goes beyond the hashtags, the awareness goes beyond the am I next to? Now we're looking at a place where we can see how technology can be used to leverage or for survivors to be able to have access through the justice system. We like to call this or use the term tech for good, because awareness isn't actually equals to action. Awareness comes when you give the community the power to be able for them to lead the action, but also giving them the tools to be able to know or what to do when it's time for them to lead the action. So why did we decide to use technology as a tool for gender-based violence? Is because we want to enable access to justice for those who are experiencing gender-based violence through innovative technology, data-informed reporting, and capacity building. One of the reasons why our founder started Grit was because she had an incident in 2021 where a family member was found dead due to femicide, 9 months pregnant, 19 years, in the highway. It never got televised. They didn't have the hashtags. It wasn't publicized. And that for her was an issue but also understanding how the family struggled with the DNA, or understanding the legal system on how to go about to make sure that the perpetrators were found, but also just to make sure that the child was buried in dignity. That's where the idea came from, where we are always on our phones. We are always looking for information, whether it would be on TikTok or YouTube or whatever. Why do we not create or be in a place or position ourselves in a place where technology can be used for good? And these are the horrific stats that actually made us want to do this. In every 22nd, a woman and a girl is being raped in South Africa. There is an average of 4% conviction rate of sexual violence cases, and those are just the reported one. 33 children are violently attacked every day. So we decided, let's create these innovations. What are those innovations? The first one, we have the Grit mobile app, we have Zuzi, our AI chatbot, and we have the WhatsApp line. The reason why we decided to do this, because everything is community-led. When you think of technology, or when you think of AI, or where the world is going digitally, the technology is created for the Western standardized type of people. It is not created in the South African context that understands the nuances of unemployment, of domestic violence, of the systematic issues that we go through. So it was very important that we create a technology that speaks to the South African context, that understands the languages, that understands some of the barriers, that understands some of the digital literacy that the people have in our communities, for them to be able to access and get all these other things, whether it's the legal help, whether it's able to get help in a case of a gender-based violence issue, or whether to be supported in an issue that they're going through. So our Grit app is a free-to-use app where you need Wi-Fi and data to download the app. After you've downloaded the app, you can access all these apps. You can access the app for free. It is a panic button where you get free access to private security or arms response. You are able to store evidence for up to 10 years. And you are also able to find support services near you in anything and everything that has to do with gender-based violence. Everything is color-coded in the map, and based on the service that you are looking for, you will find there. 90% of the support services that are here are free to use, so you can walk in and access these services for free. We tried doing that intentionally because we also need to cater thinking of the unemployment rates and also of some of the resources that are available in some of the other provinces and places, and so on and so forth. And then we also have our AI chatbot, Zuzi. So if you are thinking Chat GPT or Ask Meta AI, we are Chat GBV. So we're here to talk to you about all things gender-based violence, all things SRHR. We're here to talk to you about how to have sexual pleasure after being sexually assaulted. This is something that was created because we wanted a tool that is, one, going to be non-judgmental, number two, that's going to understand the South African context, but number three, that's going to be available for people to have someone to talk to 24/7 at any time and be able to get that help that they're willing to get. And then we have our WhatsApp line. Our WhatsApp line is more of a psychosocial support. And the reason why we have the psychosocial support is, let's say maybe you've already opened a case and then you don't know what's going on with your case, or something is wrong. We've seen cases where perpetrators will open protection orders against the survivors just to spite them. This is where you can reach out to us on our WhatsApp line, and we can help you with our 25 pro bono lawyers in and around South Africa. And we also do a lot of court support. Okay, so you are asking me, why are all these things important? They're important because they address the power dynamic and they also address the culture dynamic. For instance, all our technology, we try by all means to minimize and make sure that the work. Is there someone speaking in the background? Okay. It addresses the power and the culture dynamic. We are taught, especially in the South African context, we are taught about imbogodo. We are taught about not speaking up. As women, when we are married, we are taught to suffer in silence and not speak up. So with the technology, it eliminates the whole cultural thing, because whenever you decide to talk to someone or press that panic button, we're not asking you which culture you're coming from. We're not asking you if you're a male or a female. We're not asking you how you identify. We are there to only help you, and we are knowing that when you press that panic button, it means that you need the help and the assistance that's available. We've had a lot of people who are complaining about the fact that when you speak about gender-based violence, it only encompasses female, but this app and the tools that we have created are inclusive of everyone. So anyone can have access to these tools. Why is this important, and why does this go to community and leading? The most important thing is that Grit co-creates their innovation tools with the communities. So what we do is we go to communities where resources are limited, where digital literacy is limited, where gender-based violence is at its peak, and we say to them, what are the issues here? If there was an app to help gender-based violence, what would you want it to have? Who would you want your first respondents to be? What are some of the issues that you go through when you open a case? And what can we do to gap those breaches and cover those things? Which is the same thing that we do on our Zuzi with our chatbots. If you had someone to talk to, would you want it to be an aunt? Would you want it to be a person? How would you want it to look like? How should the tone be? How should the color feel? So it makes you feel welcomed. By going into these spaces and co-creating and asking the people who are actually going through the issues and the struggles to say, these are our issues and this is how they look, the solution look like, it means you are doing more than awareness. It means you are making the community part of the solution. It means you are not thinking about gender-based violence as abroad. You are thinking about gender-based violence based on culture. You are thinking on gender-based violence based on religion. You are thinking of gender-based violence based on systematically where we are placed and our rules and how we are raised and everything, which makes whatever solution that you are coming from or for a solution that you are coming to structured and designed to cater for the people who are technically and automatically going through that. And with that being said, please feel free to follow us on our social media, look at the work that we do. If anyone in this call sees a synergy for us to work together, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And thank you so much. My time is up. Lilita, I think you're muted. Yeah, you're good now.
I'm good, ne? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Kwenzokuhle. We thank you so much, Kwenzokuhle. You've shown us the pulling of our trade, the trend of GBV reveals how deeply it runs through our daily lives and how culture shifts can re-stitch a different future. What I forgot to mention is that please, audience, do go to our chats to share your stories, your questions, and your reflections. It is not a different part. It is also part of this dialogue. Together, we want to make the invisible visible. On our invisible trade runs through a budget. The policy is a number that quietly shapes what is seen and unseen. Aliya from AIDC will help us trace how our choice keeps women's work hidden and how valuing it differently could rewave the fabric of our economy. Aliya, I'll pass over the mic to you. Please share with us.
Thank you so much. Are you able to see my screen? I'm assuming that is all good. Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation this evening. I will talk about how gender-blind budgets are actually blind to reality and how they ignore the unpaid work that holds our society together. I'll discuss why we must design fiscal policy that values this work and protects people's dignity, especially considering the very real everyday crises that should not be normalized. So we often encounter these headlines about extreme unemployment, and while this is true, narratives around dependency and laziness are not. So you can see in this picture here the number of people who are employed, unemployed, discouraged work seekers, and not economically active. And this is from Stats SA. So this term of there's a term that economists use called not economically active, which is traditionally used to describe people who are not in the labor force. So they are not employed, neither are they searching for work. For South Africa, the number of people in this category are about 17 million people, but this does not mean that 17 million people do not work. Majority of people, especially women, are actively engaged in unpaid work, and they're the ones who build and sustain communities. According to Stats SA, for every man who is not in the labor force due to homemaking responsibilities, there are 8 women in the same position. So you can see this in the figure over here. But if you reflect about your day from this morning to this evening, from the time that you woke up, in the morning, to preparing your food, to ensuring that children are cleaned, fed, and clothed, to making sure that elderly people are cared for and seen to preparing supper, and then doing it all again. We need to think about who are the people in the household who ensure that all of this work gets done. And beyond the home and the household, there's also a lot of activity that takes place in communities. The reality and situation is so dire that in many communities where crime, hunger, and unemployment intersect, people end up structuring their day and their movements around whichever soup kitchen is available. In the majority of the cases, it is the women in the communities who often identify as themselves being unemployed, who volunteer time and do the extremely important work of creating spaces to feed, uplift, and sustain themselves and the people surrounding them. And when the state withdraws from its constitutional responsibilities, it is often through the coerced resilience of women, girls, and the communities themselves that people survive. And I would like to give a few examples of what I mean here. When a public service is taken away or not provided, there's a lot of time and labor that is spent on trying to get that thing back. So access to water, whether you are in an affluent area in Joburg or living in an informal settlement, can often be very precarious. When there is no infrastructure in the house to access or remove water, it takes a lot more time to clean yourself, to prepare food, to make sure your children are clothed than it would when there is the infrastructure in place. While access to water, to a water source close to one's home is like quite high in South Africa, and it's one of the primary achievements of the early 2000s and transitions into democracy. The majority of South Africa, so most households, the average household actually, does not have a tap inside their house or their place of that they stay. So you can imagine that like every morning when they have to clean themselves, have to like find a way to remove that water and take it out of the house. And at time, prior to going to work, where often people live on the urban peripheries, and it's exacerbated on so many different levels because of the very deep structures and histories which people in this country experience even today. And I also want to tie into this concept of community since it's one of the themes of the series. So there is an area in Cape Town called Salt River, close to the CBD, that historically been largely a working class area where a lot of the textile factories were initially established. Today, many communities are being pushed out because of gentrification. And like many areas in South Africa, it is also a place where it is unsafe for women to walk in alone at night due to crime and gangsterism. A week ago, I joined a women-only walk that is aimed to reclaim public spaces at night that have, and to try to reclaim spaces that have been deemed to be too unsafe. And during this time, we stopped on murals and historical sites where the history of the area was explained and the parallels were drawn between the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa and the struggle for a free Palestine. And there were over 150 women and children present, walking in the streets until almost midnight. At one point, we stopped outside what used to be a textile factory. So there's the picture of the textile factory over there, which has now been transformed into, I think, into an office block. And we heard a story about a woman. So like 70 years ago, women in Cape Town used to be quite actively employed in the textile industry in particular. And so we heard the story about how a woman shop steward would set up workers' bursary and funds that would go to funding tertiary education of people who would then end up becoming community doctors at a time where every piece of legislation worked in contradiction to this outcome. And I'm telling the story because I also wanted to illustrate that even in times that felt like dystopian and hopeless, there are these examples of how women involved in all different types of paid and unpaid work have tied and held communities together. But I also do not want to romanticize and normalize this idea that people should be coerced into resilience. There is a role for the state to play to ensure that people's dignity is protected. But what we have been seeing is how budget cuts, austerity, and corruption have hollowed out public services, and how this often has a disproportionate impact on women and girls. It's not only about the funding of NPOs, but it's also about in like the austerity which is being inflicted on the healthcare sector, on the education sector, and the impact of that erosion which takes place in the broader community. So what are some of the solutions to rectifying power imbalances that are largely structural and historically embedded? So change can't happen overnight, but if public spending is not designed in a way that reduces power imbalances, whether gendered, racial, or historically based, then these structural barriers will continue to persist and even worsen over time. There is an overwhelming amount of policy documents, international commitments, and guidelines on promoting gender equality and combating gender-based violence. But if these policies and commissions of inquiries do not actually result in more money allocated to social infrastructure and the care economy, then we will continue to have this narrow and parochial understanding of what is needed to have an economy that works for everyone. So ultimately, the state needs to ensure that there's an alignment between fiscal policy and the care economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aliya. You've reminded us about that budgets are not neutral. There are patterns of power where women's work is left out. The whole cloth of our society is weakened. So our final focus is on care workers, the invisible backbone of our communities. It's the labor that really gets counted, yet it keeps shareholders, workplaces, and the entire community running. Victoria from Harambee will help us bring its vital work into the light, showing how recognizing and valuing care can transform both communities and labor markets. Victoria, over to you.
Great. Evening, everyone. I feel like what I'm going to be chatting a lot about very much aligns to what Aliya covered. And so it's quite a nice build on what she said. So I'm not going to go over definitions of what is care work. And I feel like that's kind of, we've covered that. But I think the main thing that I am wanting to say about care work is that it is the backbone of society. It is a fundamental requirement to enable the broader population to be able to work. And so it's one of those enablers of the economy. At Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator, we are very excited about the care economy because it also, in terms of paid work, provides great opportunity and job creation for young people. But that aspect of care work that Aliya kind of referred to was the unpaid care work. And broadly with care work is that it is gendered, as she indicated. And, you know, there was that wonderful graph that she put up. I call it wonderful, but it was actually quite incredible seeing that difference in homemakers between women and men. And this is not a trend that's unique to South Africa. It's a global trend. So about 2 weeks ago, the International Labour Organization, the ILO, they released a report called The Women at Work. And the latest stats across G20 countries is that women on average complete about twice as much unpaid domestic and care work as men. So this is not just unique to South Africa, it's global. And it is becoming recognized globally as a phenomenon, both in terms of the opportunity it offers as an economic engine, but also the limitations it provides on women's labor market participation. So the two negative consequences to care work is, number one, is because it's gendered, it impacts women's ability to enter into the labor market, and it also impacts what jobs they choose. It impacts potentially how much they earn because it impacts how much work that they can take on. But second to that, it is also unseen, and with that, it is undervalued. If we think about our GDP, which is how we measure economic growth, that's based on paid productive activities. It's not based on unpaid. And so all the back-end care work that largely women do on a day-to-day basis, it does not fall into that category or is not recognized as part of that. So I'm going to speak a little bit from a policy level and from a global lens because this is gaining such traction amongst G20 nations and because South Africa is hosting the G20 this year. But when we think about what a robust care economy looks like, one of the tools that is used around this is a framework from the ILO called the 5R Framework for Decent Care. And ultimately, it speaks to the 5 R's where, you know, for a robust care economy, we need to recognize, reduce, and redistribute unpaid care work. So we need to find ways to shift this disproportionate responsibility of unpaid care from women, both in terms of finding ways and using technology to reduce it, but also to kind of have a bit more equality between men and women in terms of how much they engage with it. Second aspect is that we need to reward and adequately remunerate care workers. So for those who are engaged in paid care, we think about pre-primary school teachers, nurses, educators, community healthcare workers, domestic workers, they all should be paid adequately and decently. And that also then links to the final R around the state framework, which is representation. So those who are engaged in paid care, that their rights are protected. So this is so much of a hot topic that within the broader G20, there is actually a goal around this or a link to this called the labor market participation gap. And it was called the Brisbane Goal. It was signed just over 10 years ago. And it said by 2025, all G20 nations, of which South Africa is one of them, needs to reduce the gender labor market participation gap by 25%. As you can imagine, we've now reached that deadline, and South Africa is one of the 9 countries that has managed to reduce it by 25%. But the fact remains is our gender labor market participation gap is still 10%. So what that means is that there is a higher proportion of men in the labor market than women. And so this is still something that where more work needs to be done to address this gap and to find ways for women to enter into the labour market by reducing unpaid care and potentially mobilizing the economic engine that is the care economy for job creation purposes. So broadly, what needs to change around that? A couple of things, and I think, again, it builds very much on what Aliya was saying. I think first and foremost is that we need a comprehensive, coordinated, multi-stakeholder approach to care. I know this sounds like a little bit of a mouthful, but if you think about how care work is often viewed and perceived, it operates in silos. You've got the Department of Health, who looks after the nurses. You've got the Department of Education, who looks after the educators and early childhood development. You've got Department of Social Development, who looks after the social workers. But by having an approach that kind of knits it all together and has these different components of care working together, you can build a robust plan for care. So what this requires is a national policy for care and a master plan to create a cohesive picture of what the care economy could look like in South Africa as a whole. Secondly, we need to invest in care very much. This includes putting part of the fiscal base towards care-related work. This also includes maybe engaging the private sector, because there really is a role in the private sector to unlock care, and there's opportunities with public-private models to really just find ways to inject capital into the sector to build that infrastructure. There's a need to engage in targeted awareness campaigns to address harmful social norms on care being purely just women's work, and to encourage the shared responsibility across. This calls for a mind shift change, and that's probably some of the work that would happen within community and on the ground. We also need to better recognize what care means. So part of this means we need to collect data, and particularly for unpaid care, because it's not recognized. One of the mechanisms that is used to recognize how much time is spent on unpaid care is something called a time use survey. Within South Africa, we've got institutions like Counting Women's Work who analyze this data and provide reports on it. But the last time we had a time use survey was in 2010, which was 15 years ago. And secondly, a lot of this data is not kind of fed into national statistics. And so even though we have it and there might be insights around it, it might not necessarily be informing policymaking just yet. More practically, in terms of kind of what this means for me in terms of recognizing care, is that if we think about some of the biggest barriers that young people in particular face trying to access the labor market is lack of paid work experience. But yet unpaid work experience, such as unpaid care, still develops critical skills such as organization, such as communication, such as budgeting. And so recognizing this when you are applying for work as a signal that I can do this and I have these skills can help young people to better signal their ability to the labor market in the absence of work experience. And on a side note to that, that is something that Harambee as an organization is problem solving, and something we are planning to bring into our inclusive CV, which was released on the SA Youth platform last month. And then finally, we need to protect care workers. So this is a tricky one because we do have obviously legislation around this. We've got minimum wage requirements. And for the private sector, it is very much as simple as kind of pay appropriately, aligned to legislation. However, not everyone can afford care services. And the best example I can give is early childhood development, where people might not be able to afford preschool for their kids. Finding ways for government to inject capital into these sectors and building that infrastructure is critical for the protection of care workers. And the one kind of glimmer of light we are seeing around this was with the recent budget. There was a 10 billion rand injection into the ECD sector for subsidies, which not only enables the expansion of the subsidies to 700,000 extra children, but it also enables ECD practitioners who are operating ECD centers to be able to earn a little bit more appropriately than what they currently are. Many ECD practitioners are earning below minimum wage. And so finding ways to kind of build this infrastructure, whether it's publicly funded or privately funded, to protect the care workers, starts to create another economy where the job creation can unfold and creates an opportunity for the care economy to really be an area that we can start creating employment, creating jobs, whilst also benefiting, those who are receiving care, as well as benefiting women who are the predominant caregivers within society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for that. So basically, everything that's being said and done. So Victoria was our last speaker of the day that was speaking for us. So what I'm hearing is what mostly I grasped in all of those conversations. It was the first topics where they talked about AI Zuzi, where the community can work together. If the community feels that they need something, they can speak to AI Zuzi, and Zuzi will be there for the GBV, helping out the community. It will help with shaping out the community. And then we talked about the policies of our community that they do need to change so that women's work could be recognized. But lastly, Victoria told us about how we need to change and protect our care workers, and mostly on everything. Before we go to the next section, which is our Q&A, which is our questions and answers, where we get questions from our listeners and our audience. A reminder that this conversation doesn't end here. We are inviting you to take what sparked you today and host your own reflection meetups, and speak to your friends and peers. We'll be also sharing a toolkit for more information. It will be shared now, not after this conversation, on our chat box. And if you're keen to lead one, please raise your hand in the chat or drop a message. We would love to support you. So I think now, before our time is against us, let's go to our Q&As. We have questions on our chat box. This question, firstly, that I'm going to read, it's for Aliya. It says, where do you see gender building budget having the biggest? I'm sorry, I can't quite get to this message. I'm trying to open it. What happened? Can everybody still see me?
I can see the question in the chat. So should I read it out?
Please, I can't quite find it.
Okay. So the question for me is, where do you see gender blinding budgeting having the biggest impact on women's daily lives? I'm not so sure if you want to ask a number of questions or if I should address this first.
Please address each question so that the person gets it.
So I want to say that the opposite of a gender blind budget is a gender responsive budget. And this would mean a budget that works for everyone, not just women, but men, children, girls, boys, non-binary people. And the problem that we have currently is that austerity has a disproportionate impact on women and vulnerable groups in particular. So a gender blind budget would maybe deprioritize compensation for community healthcare workers. It could maybe not allocate funding for people who are involved in the National School Nutrition Program. Often women's work in the paid economy is deemed as is labeled as volunteers, not women's work, but jobs which are disproportionately represented by women. It will be labeled as a volunteer rather than something that should be like adequately compensated for. So then we see a deprioritization of particular services and public infrastructure and social infrastructure when it comes to austerity. And Yeah, so I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Aliya. I hope the person who asked got answered. So I also have a question here for Kwenzokuhle, which says, how does tech complement in-person support systems in rural areas for GBV survivors? And how do we ensure it does not replace in-person supports? Kwenzokuhle, over to you.
Yes, I think I'll start by the first and most important thing. I don't think tech will ever replace in-person support. I think tech can be a great tool to be used when in-person is limited. Hence, for example, when I said like with the AI chatbots, it's available 24/7. So no person can be available 24/7. It's also how it complements, how we have seen how it complements with grids is that for example, if we look at places like we've worked with areas like your Lusigisigi and Mqhagezweni, and a police station there is like 52 kilometers away. So what we will do there is we'd work with the community forums, we'd work with the leaders, so that when someone presses the panic button, the first respondent is the community forum and the leaders. I think it's also important just to put out there to say there are certain things that tech can do that a lot of people can also not do, but also at the same time, there are so many things that tech cannot do that human beings can do. So what we do is we just try to make sure that where tech can go far, we spread it as far as it can go. But I don't believe there could ever be a place where tech would replace in person. I hope I answered that question properly. Thank you.
No problem. We also have a question for Victoria. There is a win-win in supporting care economy for the entire economy. Does Harambee do any advocacy engagement on the budget on care workers?
So I'm going to attempt to answer the question. So firstly, yes, we like to say the care economy is actually a triple impact sector, because not only can it create jobs, but it can also enable caregivers, primary caregivers, to free up their time so they can access the labor market. And then there's also the beneficiary to the individuals who receive care services. So naturally, it is a priority area for Harambee because it ticks a lot of boxes in terms of an enabler of getting young people into work. The work of Harambee is across the ecosystem and across various sectors. And all of our work actually is in partnership with others. So the reason I'm giving this round answer is that we do work advocating for the prioritization of the care economy within South Africa. We do not directly engage in the budget. That's not our forte. But with partners, our big thing is building this business case for the economic engine of the care economy. And there is work being done within Harambee to really understand what the potential of the care economy could be for South Africa and for job creation. There's also been lots of movement, I think, just given this focus within the G20 and within the Women 20 engagement group on the care economy. There's a lot of focus on what potentially a care economy policy could be for the country. And so I think it is a very exciting time when you look at it from that sense, because I think there's a lot that could be catalyzed from it. And we're just really excited about what that could mean down the line in a year or so.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Aliya, I'm going to have to come back to you. So the question that is in the chat box for you is, what's one radical shift we need to make so that care isn't seen as women's work, but as shared society responsibility that deserves competitive, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that word. I hope you can say it, remuneration, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And I think it's important. So I think Victoria touched on the 5R framework. And one of those elements in this framework is about redistribution. And I don't really think I've touched on this enough as I was talking, but it's not just, it's about valuing this work. So it's not about, you know, this idea that it's backward to be involved in homemaking, it's backward to be involved in being in the kitchen, like those are all like very important things that everybody needs to survive, right? But it's about how do we share this responsibility that sustains everyone. So it's also about redistributing it within the household with the men in the household, with the children in the household, with the broader family network, with the broader community. But then I also wanted to emphasize that there is this very important role of the state and the government. So the infrastructure in the care economy and the infrastructure in the care sector, so that not all of the care work can be replaced with technology, right? There's some work that will always be very labor intensive. For example, taking care of an elderly member is extremely labor intensive and cannot be replaced with technology, but fetching water outside one's household can be replaced with technology if there's like the proper infrastructure within a home. But then it should not be up to the woman only to look after the elderly person, but it should involve the men too, and that's where the redistribution aspect comes in. But then also, because of the depth of hunger and poverty within a household, there is this additional support needed from the state to, in the form of maybe stipends or remuneration. So there's a social grant system, and there's this thing called the grant and aid that is specifically used when there's an elderly person who's dependent on a caretaker within the home. This amount is very little, and it's often extremely difficult to access. Like, there are a lot of barriers, and like the uptake is very small compared to the need out there. So like, I think there is more intentional, like there needs to be a more intentional and a more I can't find the words right now, but a more focused way of ensuring that this care work is not just seen as the role of the woman, but as a shared community responsibility. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Aliya. So the last question goes to anybody who's willing to answer, because it says for everyone. It says, you all have a great insights. Do you think the government is listening?
I'm happy to. I'll start the answer. I'd love to hear what the other panelists say. I think optimistically, I think yes. I think government does realize what both the opportunity that the care economy provides, and forgive me, I'm going to speak specifically to the care economy because I want to be talking about, as well as the barrier it lands often women in. I think there are, however, challenges. There's fiscal challenges. Technically, the provision of care services should be a public good. But I think fiscal constraints prevent it from being so within South Africa. And so we do see glimmers of light. We see, for example, like I mentioned, that additional 10 billion rand into the ECD sector, which is part of the budget. But the challenge is that has to be offset with something else. And the need is big within South Africa, and the budget is only so big. And so I think continuing to advocate for what the potential of the care economy could offer in terms of returns, in terms of economic growth, can hopefully continue the conversation and give it prioritization within government and within the budget.
Okay, thank you so much. We are well over time. And we apologize for that. We know we said it 9, but I think we're going to close it up, rip it out now. But firstly, I would like to thank all the speakers, Kwenzokuhle, Aliya, and Victoria, for being here and giving us the insights on the things we need to know about this trend and the topics of today. Here's what I want you to take with you tonight. Invisible trends only stay invisible if we let them. When we name them, when we value them, and when we fight for them, they become unbreakable ropes that hold our community stronger. This Women's Month, let's refuse invisibility. Let's value care. Let's demand that budgets see us. Let's end GBV not with hashtags, but with cultural shifts. Because when we wave these traits together, we don't just survive, we build communities that thrive. For the digital space, we tank traits that stretch to everybody across South Africa in community halls, libraries, classroom, youth center. People will gather to wave these invisible trends into something valuable and powerful. So what do we do now? We meet, we talk, we stitch, we challenge, and together we create a fabric of change that we can hold, share, proudly say it's ours. Please don't forget to join your local community facilitator, join the movement, and wave the trend into the story of transformation, because community is a verb, and together we're making the invisible visible. Community is the verb. Let's keep waving. And thank you to everybody who was here, who listened to this webinar and was able to share and comment and ask questions. Hope everybody was answered. So I think our time is out and we're over by 2 minutes. So I would say thank you to everybody. Take care. See you at the meetup. Don't forget the link that is in the chat box to connect and get more information. Thank you so much.